if you could please take your seats and get settled in for our next session. All right. Our next session is titled How AI is Influencing Findability in E-commerce and Service. It will be led by Martin Baumgartel, the head of site search at Verizon. He studied mathematics at Friedrich Schiller University. He has been involved in projects concerning mass data retrieval problems during work at the German National Library Institute. In 2013, he joined Verizon Wireless to oversee site search and findability with a focus on e-commerce and e-support. Please join me in welcoming Martin to the stage.
Hello, thank you. So, quick question towards the start. Whom of you took the chance to actually went over to the other room, the technical panel, because there was already a search presentation given by Amin Kazaruni from the Zappos team. So who had the chance to go there? Okay, lucky me, it's not the majority, because for those of you who had listened to that, you might think, hey, Martin can go home now, or we could talk about some other things, like the penalty that was given to the US soccer team during the World Championship, because he had an hour time to talk about AI and how the data modeling influences site search. So I'm challenged now with taking a little bit of a different approach, but here it comes. So you will actually listen. When you listen to me, it's the other side of the house. So he was approaching it more from the AI native perspective and data modeling. And as you heard in the introduction, I'm coming more from the traditional site search house. So, you know, search engines, Solar or Endeca in the past, whatever has been used. So again, I talk to the business track. So I hope still that there is something new in my presentation that will benefit you there. And also, at the beginning, I will take a little bit of a different start because what you heard day long is already use cases, right? So the world of AI and how it influences e-commerce, there are also many use cases out there that probably none of us can put a grasp on it entirely. So this is something I want to point out to you. If you run a startup or a smaller company, Verizon actually has a 5G challenge out there. So you might have heard about 5G, new network speed, lower latency, so that will enable many new use cases that Verizon, my company, is not even sure of, you know, how that's going to play out. So you heard about smart cities and healthcare solutions. So there's a challenge out there. When you go to verizonwireless.com, you see that 5G navigation entry. You can go there and learn about the condition of that challenge. So you can actually submit use cases and potential solutions there, and you can win money up to $1 million. So how about that for a start, right? That's different what Zappos told you. Okay, so, but again, that has nothing to do with site search. So let me dig into it. So here you have it, the challenge. I informed you, so good luck. So back to site search and e-commerce. So just as a motivation, so in this data set, I still find that interesting. You see when they asked or surveyed customers for manufacturer websites, the on-site search and navigation function actually scored very high in terms of what people use. And if I would ask you again, who performed a search today, be it Amazon or Nike or any retailer, potentially a good amount of hands will go up, because this is what we use for discovery when we do e-commerce, right? So this is just a justification. Why do I have my job, right? And why search is important. You will also notice this is not the newest data. So this survey was coming in 2017. And what I personally would expect that you actually see a little bit of a shift there, because, you know, live chat and chatbots, it was actually further down. So that picture might have changed a little bit. If you have newer data than that from Astound Commerce or any different entity that's compiling this data, share it with me. I would be interested, you know, how that picture actually has been shuffled around a little bit. But people do search. In our case, you would think, hey, Verizon, what's the big deal about their site search? We don't have as deep of a product catalog as other e-commerce players have, so it's mainly about phones and accessories, so we don't have the million SKUs that Zappos or Amazon or other large players are having. But here it comes also a finding from 24/7. So they actually honed in on the telecommunication area. And guess what? This mirrors actually the reality I see every day when I scan through our search log. So people ask their telco provider all sorts of things. It is not necessarily the iPhone, Samsung Galaxy. Of course, these are the highest scoring e-commerce queries we are facing every day. But it's virtually any topic that we are being asked. And there is that long tail phenomena, quite a big deal. And telco customers mostly ask low complexity questions, but that can border, when they go on vacations, is my phone going to work in Jamaica, or when I'm going to be on a cruise ship. So it starts low, but we also have seen some other stuff. An anecdote here about semantics, and you could think already machine learning or query rewriting or context, or what's the semantic of any given query. So my funniest example is actually the query we had T-shirt. So you might think, why would someone search for T-shirt at Verizon Wireless? We are not in the fashion business. But it happened, and it was actually in the top 20 for a particular time frame. So we were thinking, hey, is that corporate gear? Do they want to wear Verizon T-shirts? We have those, right, for our associates. Turns out it was actually about a country song by Thomas Rhett back in the day that was the #1 in the country charts. So what's the connection to Verizon? Ringtones. So it turns out that we get a lot of these, pop culture or artist queries when this is about music, and people want to have that as their ringtone or ringback tone, what gives, right? So, but that already gets you deep into the modeling, right? So what did we learn from this, and what's our angle to actually play better in the long tail phenomena for that? So a quick, let me step aside for a minute, because, as you heard in the intro, originally I studied mathematics, but this is some time ago. So AI, there's that famous Turing test out there where it tells you what's real AI and what's not. So again, when I went to college, that was the teaching back in the day. So a machine would have to pass a Turing test. I won't read it out here, but generally behind the curtain, another human being wouldn't be able to tell the difference. What is this dialogue actually coming from a machine, or is it from a human being? So why do I bring up here like old theories and stuff? Because what we have seen a lot, and what I still see a lot, is what is AI, and then I'm being shown chatbots, and when you dig a little bit deeper, well, there's just a decision tree behind it, so that already brings you, oh, this is limited scope. It will only perform when this model is sort of modeled in the decision tree. Towards the right-hand side, you see actually a new feature on VerizonWireless.com. So we also do guided shopping now in terms of when you search smartphone, or when you are on that smartphone grid wall, you can invoke that guided selling, like what type of phone is good for you. So yeah, we do that. Would I personally call that AI? So again, I would say no. This is limited scope, has nothing to do with general or artificial intelligence in my book. So you have to aim a little bit higher in my book to actually qualify for AI. But that's just my take on it. This graph looks simple, but it's your typical, the explanation of the long tail phenomenon. So I already picture like, yeah, of course, iPhone, Samsung Galaxy, or data usage. That's always like in the head. There's a very, very large volume for that for us, and people search for that. But then again, there's a long tail, and what we want to do is for machine learning and AI is actually to lift the performance in the long tail. Because again, another mass tidbit here, As you all have learned when you had your math classes at college, even if you didn't go for math but computer science, you will all know that the volume, since that long tail is literally like going on forever, the actual volume there is bigger than the head. So when you calculate it into revenue or any e-commerce KPI, this is where the real value is. On top of it, the head, this is what search teams have been doing all the time, right? So of course you can go manually in and maintain a little bit your search engine and do best matches and other tricks in order to make sure, yeah, okay, for iPhone and Samsung Galaxy, sure you can attend to the head, but of course for the long tail that will never scale. So therefore you need AI or machine learning to do that, and that's the reason we entered it. So this is also simple. So we migrated to a new search engine, a Solr-based search engine last year, towards the end of last year. So what happened since that Solr engine comes with a machine learning component. And of course, we didn't bet the farm on the entire machine learning only. So the machine learning component is just one element in the relevancy formula, apart from, of course, partial matches, title matches, brand matches, and all these type of things, what at Subway was also talked about. So this is actually sort of a voting model. So you see the difference here before and after for a query, for a Fitbit, how actually our customers in a certain way influence the result set. So you can see, okay, initially when the search engine was only calculating relevancy like for the matches and keyword matches, the Fitbit Flex, there was an article about that at number 2. And not too surprisingly, that picture has changed. So now it's actually the more new products being there with the Fitbit Versa. So this is a typical before and after use case in the e-commerce space. Let me pause here for a moment, and now I'm going to shift gears because the next example you see here looks entirely different. And now you will ask yourself, hey, where are the pretty pictures, right? So this is no longer about products. So actually for Verizon Wireless, it's almost a 50-50 play. Well, okay, there are seasonalities, of course, like for any other given retailer. So Thanksgiving, Christmas season is a little bit different. But on average, so in an average month, it's a 50-50 play that we see a lot of product queries like Fitbit, but we also see a lot of service queries where people, like I told you, in that other study, they asked Verizon Wireless all sorts of things related to their service, but not limited to their service, like T-shirt. So what happened here? Typical query on the support side, well, upgrade actually borders on sales, right? But it's sort of the Verizon process how to deal with it. And again, 50% of the volume being in support. So the same applied here, machine learning model, the before and after picture. So for upgrade, we had a lot of community content about it where people talk about their upgrade experience and how in their particular case, if you are military, it might be a bit different and all these type of things. And then after the machine learning kicked in, we saw a very good improvement there in terms of our KPIs, click-throughs, and actually transactions that came out of it. So again, no pretty pictures here because this is attending to the side of the house internally where we work closely with the support team and the content partners that write these FAQs and knowledge base articles. So this is click-through rate. Of course, also here, you have to take into account that these data is usually biased, right? So we all know there is like these self-enforcement things. When you go to Google, how many of you just click the #1 result before inspecting it much because you just trust Google as a search engine? Yeah, usually the #1 is good, I go there. And if you luck out, then you go back and perhaps click the #2. So be careful here. Of course, the click-through rate, what we see in result positions, the #1 is mostly winning. It's not a direct indicator whether you did a good job with your search engine. But again, so we are satisfied with that machine learning approach. And before I go here, let's step back for a moment and actually talk about what else is out there on our path at Verizon Wireless. So, confession I have to make, the Zappos example, I think that was very interesting. And as a poor e-commerce retailer, I have to confess they are further in their journey with AI and machine learning than we are, right? Because again, these two sides of the houses that we have to juggle the balance between poor e-commerce play and service. There are just more stakeholders, to satisfy, and also Verizon as a phone company might be not at the forefront and might be a larger ship, so we cannot innovate as fast probably as Zappos did it. But what's next on our path? So, what I mentioned earlier, the machine learning component that sits or that works together with our Solar search engine. So that's live in production now. We have seen some very good and encouraging results for that. But as far as further data modeling goes and further personalization, so those steps are actually next. Where we are lucky, I think, and that's why we are going to go there next this year, is that we maintain a lot of direct relationships with customers, right? So when you look at the customer base, Verizon Wireless, more than 100 million customers. These customers have accounts with us, they log in, they pay their bill, they inspect their data usage. So there's, again, a large asset of data that we can leverage. But again, we are coming from the search engine side, so gosh, now I'm going to mention the Zappos example for the 5th or 6th time, so bear with me there. So this is exactly what he was talking about too, right? So that traditionally speaking, the site search teams and data science team was usually not the same team, right? So where he was working on the data science side, that's next for us too, to reach out to our own data science team and actually do integrative work and challenge them also with some models, because a term that we use a lot and that he used a lot too is whack-a-mole, right? So when you start improving your relevancy algorithm with all the long tail improvements and you do query rewriting in order to actually do some semantic analysis on your long tail and then map that to a query that's actually in the head where you know it performs very well. So you can do a lot of things traditionally with your site search engine, but at a certain point, you're reaching your limits. So in your relevancy formula, you have also many signals and you optimize the signals, and then comes the next use case like t-shirt, and then boom, you don't perform well for that, right? So there's a limit what you can do with native tools in the site search space. And again, we want to bridge that gap and actually tap into the personalized data what Verizon is knowing about the customers based on the account that customers are having with us. Mind you, even there, the picture is a little bit more complex than perhaps your typical e-commerce shop, because again, we deal with a lot of family households. So in our model for personalization, there's an account, but then there's a primary account holder, but there can be other people on your account, like your 26-year-old kid. That's still part of your plan. So in order to do a personalization, our modeling might be a little bit more complex than a typical one-on-one relationship where, I don't know, you and your wife buy your shoes separately and you both have an account with Zappos, let's say, or assume. So therefore, where we are now, search is one platform. So we went for the low-hanging fruit in terms of, with our own search interaction rates and the ways how users are interacting with our search results, that's where we kick in our machine learning, and that has given us, again, a good benefit already. And the entire space of personalization is next for us. So what I want to stress here in this slide is we see AI architecture as an architecture or platform picture where search in itself is a platform. So there's a good relationship, sometimes I call it cousin disciplines, between search and text analytics, because what you can do there is go what I mentioned earlier. So you have long tail queries, and if you do some good and tricky text analytics, you can do semantic rules and match the set to actually head queries. So if you want to go low-hanging fruit, I would recommend look into text analytics first. That's not AI, but it can help you later when you enter the AI space. So text analytics is, there's also SAS as a vendor out there. I saw them there, so that's a good vendor to perhaps talk to about that, but of course they're not the only one. That's one platform I would recommend looking into. Voice of the customer. We get a lot of voice of the customer data from different sources, actually. So you saw the community posts. That's actually coming from customers, and then Verizon reps usually give a response there. But again, there are more signals, voice of the customer that you can take into account. So we look into that too. And then grid vaults. So again, product grid vaults, usually, or in many cases, you have actually the site search engine power these grid vaults. Also, nothing was queried, but the query is sort of hard-coded into the system to perform there. Again, when it comes to machine learning, it's easy to take the lessons from search and actually apply that there too. But most importantly, I want to talk about chatbots, because my perspective here is, and it actually showed in an earlier slide when I ventured into the question what is actually AI and what's not, where I said the current chatbots with a limited dialogue tree, for me that's not AI. So quote what I've heard from AI folks, actually within my company, in the IT, where your IT partner plays a role, and one of the individuals, actually pretty high up, was confronting me once. Hey, Martin, now that we work on chatbot and AI, I predict for you that site search will go out of business. We are not going to need that anymore. And I was like, interesting. And my response was, what's the most successful chatbot right now? It's perhaps a Google Assistant. On what did Google's CEO say about the Google Assistant? He actually said, the Google Assistant will only get better because our search always gets better, because certain insights that Google generates from search are actually fed into the chatbot. So I sort of challenged him back, like, well, it's nice of you to say that site search goes out of business, but my recommendation would actually be to not treat that as separate platforms. Chatbot is going to rule the world, and site search is going to get pushed aside. But why don't we take the Google approach in terms of chatbot has a lot to learn, and if it wants to hop over that threshold to become real AI, my personal opinion as well, then it should learn some cues, you know, how the investments into search and site search in our case has been done, and that should be a partnership and not an antagonism, right? So that's how we view it, and that's what's our path there. And again, I talked a little bit about future work, and this is also, I'm glad it came up in a question in another session, novelty or serendipity events. So, you know, the echo chamber effect. For site search, again, we have always been confronted with the novelty, because, again, back to my T-shirt example, you cannot make this up enough, so you can't even think about what certain users will ask you, at least when you work at a phone company, right? Also, I mentioned text analytics earlier. There are problems there too, so natural language processing, you heard that all the time, and training. But what about certain things like irony? So from what I've seen, there are still challenges out there how to actually understand or deal with irony. And then, of course, intent switch. So that's, again, very important for us, because what I always pictured as two sides of the house, oh yeah, there's support and there's e-commerce. So in an ideal world, there shouldn't be, of course, a hard wall, because what happened many times is people start on the support side, they submit a certain question, or they have a problem with their phone, or something is not working. And at a certain point, the reality is just, well, you know, it makes no sense for you to go and repair that battery, because with an offer that's just out there for a new phone, it's better for you to get the new phone rather than to invest in your old one and buy a new battery. So therefore, the intent switch, that could actually be triggered and guide the customer along the right way, or that at least it can be detected, when the person just changes the mindset and goes from a support path into an e-commerce path. So those are still things where I believe the quality has to improve. And with that, I think I'm at the end of my presentation. Text analytics, again, rule sets. That's why I said this text analytics in my book is not AI, but these rule sets, they are sophisticated ways to actually go to a certain extent and understand human language without fully investing in AI. But again, the component there is going to help you later on your AI journey. That's at least what I believe. And then finally, AI has to pass the Turing test. So that's the lever. All right.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left for questions. Any questions?
Everybody's happy.
Oh, okay. One over there. All right.
Cool, thanks. So do you currently use any NLP and deep learning in your group, or are you focused on other types of R&D?
Yeah, so we use natural language processing in a text analytics module. So that's why I use the term a lot, right? So again, it doesn't sound super innovative because text analytics models have been around there for quite some time. So again, SAS as a vendor or Clarabridge or others. So they have been around for some time, and that's what we use right now. But again, that's current state. But again, we actually want to go further and go more into the AI space with that. So we are not unhappy with it. And again, it was a low-hanging fruit for us because those modules have been already used inside Verizon for like voice of the customer use cases. So therefore, there wasn't a big buying decision involved or anything, right? So it was already a platform, and hence it was easy for us to start there.
If I can follow up, for search, do you also use other types of deep learning like LSTM or anything like that?
Currently not. So again, the machine learning that was in place there, our site search is quite popular. I mentioned the volume of like 100 million customers currently, having Verizon as a provider. So architecturally speaking, we are actually happy with the deployment right now, where that machine learning, again, it's not a technical track, but there are Spark components involved, AWS hosted. So again, it's relatively new, so we are still on the journey. Hey, let's do more tests and experiments with that. But again, later this year, we will move on and tackle some other things.
So you've been talking about the tail, how to get to the tail of terms, and also how to use, well, you call it chatbot, let's call conversational AI. So how you plan to use conversational AI to reach that tail? Or is that a plan? Or how do you, in general, going to use conversational AI?
So two things there. First of all, the long tail. So of course, the promise is our promise or what we expect from AI is that we say, hey, if we model it correctly and if we apply our learnings and if we go through all the process in terms of, hey, checking, validating, and see models out there, how they're performing, the promise is, hey, this will lift all the boats. So in terms of again, you cannot manually cater to the long tail, but if you see the impact sort of across the board, then the hope is, hey, that will lift the performance for everything. All the boats will go up, including the entire long tail. So this is sort of the assumption in there. As far as conversational search goes, so perhaps our customers are not as avant-garde as you might think. So when I did an analysis, how much of the conversational stuff is actually going on, like how many natural language questions are being asked, like how many searches start with how, why, and all the questions. So it wasn't that big for us yet. That doesn't mean much, right? So if you're bonobos or you have a different clientele, that percentage might be much higher. But again, I can't really answer that question because the conversational search approach in our site search model, it doesn't happen much yet, but of course, on the chatbot side of our house, they are entirely dedicated to it. But as I said, when they got a little bit, emboldened by more usage of the chatbot, again, my message would be don't treat it as two sides where the one will supersede the other. So. I got to work with them, but they also got to work with me. And to start with, hey, your site will go out of business, that was probably not the most clever thing to do internally.
We have time for one last question.
So in terms of like those two paradigms that you just mentioned, right? Whether chatbots and what you're doing in text, are you both working off of the same data set, the same ontology, the same view of the marketplace, the same view of your customers and your products?
No, but I think, again, the root cause for that is that the chatbot experience was a little bit, should I say, ivory tower. So it was sort of like, hey, we really have to move fast and we are not first in the game. So the chatbot team was given quite some leverage in terms of come up with your solution, do it quickly, and now that's why I had my platform slide. So in an ideal world, that integration would have been worked on already, but now both sides play a little bit catch up. Oh, look what you have done in the chatbot world. Look what we are doing with machine learning on our side. So how about we at least embrace a little bit the thought, shouldn't that be one AI platform that can consist of many components, but there should be a structural aspect that someone actually goes in with a full-fledged strategy there. As far as the ontology goes that you mentioned, I have mixed experience there. So of course in the site search world, in terms of taxonomies, ontologies, that has been discussed quite to some extent. If you go to site search conferences, you will find taxonomists and ontologists all over the place. My experience was as soon as you go to an event like this, the AI people start to look at you, why invest in that? So I've heard many times that AI folks tell me, well, taxonomy and ontologies, we don't need that anymore. The machine will take care of that. So I'm not, as you can see, I have certain reservations to that brush off, attempt there. But then again, when I talk to my superiors at Verizon, they will tell me, well, that would be great because taxonomies and ontologies, to maintain them costs a lot of money. So the judgment is out there, I would say. So you probably sense where I'm personally leaning towards too. So I probably wouldn't throw it away right now, but.
All right, thank you so much.